Hey guys, where's the bathroom? I just drank a gallon straight from the cow.
First door on the left?
Okay, thanks.
Why is Bill staring at us?
All right then, you're almost ready to come and follow me. There's just one thing you lack. You must go, sell all you have, and buy some designer robes. You guys look a hot mess and it's just not gonna work. Is that really a blanket on your shoulders?
My grandma made it.
You see, Bill, your fashion sense has only one direction. You don't know you're beautiful. And that's what makes you beautiful. Psych. Well, boys, we're down to 12. I had to let Bill go. The Apostle Bill sounds silly anyway. His name was as bad as his fashion sense. All right, let's get to Robestrom. There's a half-off sale going on.
Good morning, Restoration Church. It's Pastor Kurt, and I am so grateful that you are tuned in to our online gathering this morning. Thank you for joining us wherever you're joining us from, and thank you for allowing us to be a part of your spiritual journey this morning. We hope that as we walk through the scriptures together, that God meets with you wherever you are. We are missing you, but we are excited for these times to come together and learn as we continue in the series that we started a few weeks ago called Crazy Stuff That Jesus Said. As we look to the Beatitudes, these little phrases at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, his first message during his ministry here on earth thousands of years ago. And we've discovered that as simple as they are, they actually have profound impact and speak so clearly even to this crazy moment that we are in right now. And so as we continue today, my hope is that as we explore a topic that Jesus really kind of began in this moment of his teaching that continued throughout his ministry, that actually it would give us the opportunity, especially during this pandemic, when things are unlike any other time perhaps in our lifetime, to be able to look inward a little bit and ask some new questions to kind of explore and expose things that may have come to the surface even over these last weeks that we've been in a new experience of quarantine and staying at home. In fact, have you ever asked this question? Have you ever said or done something and wondered, where the heck did that come from? I know I have. There's many times that I'm frustrated or things don't go my way, or I'm in a conversation at home with Katie or with a friend, and I'll just say something. I'm like, where did that come from? That doesn't even sound like me. Or you've had someone else say to you, man, that was so out of character for you. That doesn't even sound like her. I don't know what she was doing. Maybe she drank too much, or maybe he was just having a really, really bad day. And yet these things that often can come out of us, especially when we're pressed, especially when we're frustrated, especially when our stress and anxiety level is heightened, sounds like the last 8-9 weeks, right? There's things that can come out of us that we don't even recognize, we don't even like, and yet all too often in those moments, there's something inside of us that goes, oh dang, that part of me was just exposed. It wasn't new, it wasn't invented because of the stress, it just was exposed. I remember hearing Brené Brown, a renowned psychologist and grief researcher, talk about this, that she was one morning getting a cup of coffee in her kitchen, and her husband, as she tells the story, had gone off to work out, and she turns around and the dishwasher was open, and she bumped her leg and spilled coffee all over herself, and immediately just swore and said, dang it, Steve. She was so frustrated, and then as she processed that moment later, and her therapist asked her, why did the coffee spill out of that cup? And she goes, well, all these reasons. He left the dishwasher open, or he didn't do this thing, or he was off and left the house early and didn't care about me. And her therapist simply said, actually, Brené, the reason that the coffee spilled out of the cup is because you had put coffee in the cup. It's the same reason that frustration spilled out of you. It was that moment, that situation that you didn't enjoy revealed and exposed something that was actually already in there that you were frustrated about. And she shares how this moment was this big breakthrough moment of her recognizing that her inner work was so important, even though she was notable for having this conversation about other people, that she still had work to do. And this is the exact type of scenario, this is the exact lesson that I think Jesus is reflecting to us in Matthew chapter 5, verse 8. So if you have a Bible, you can follow along. It'll also be up on the screen. But Jesus says this very unique thing that I want us to really dive into together. It's short, but it's so powerful. And he says this: God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will perceive God. God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will perceive God. The Greek word there is katharos, which is a very old word, but it actually means proper or without admixture, or what is separated. So when Jesus says God blesses those whose hearts are pure, he's not necessarily saying whose hearts are clean or whose hearts are perfect or whose hearts are without any defect. He's not saying these are the right kinds of people and these are the wrong kinds of people. What he's saying is it's actually a better translated word of integrated or authentic, whole, or even the word distilled or without additives. See, Jesus is the original purist, right? He's not saying, oh, you got to make sure that you're right and not be bad or wrong or sinful. What he's simply saying is you want to make sure that your heart is brought fully out without additives. All of us have these spaces in our life, whether it's with our food or our gasoline, if you don't drive an electric car, or even our alcohol. We want it to be distilled. We want it to be pure. We don't want it to have additives. And yet for many of us, oftentimes, when we come to God, when we come to our engagement in whatever spirituality we have, as we're exploring the things of God, as we're beginning to follow Jesus, or for many of us, if we grew up in a religious context, this could even be more difficult, that we actually often believe that religious additives, playing the part, saying the right thing, that's actually how we see God or perceive God or understand what God is all about. But Jesus said that's not actually the case. It's actually the pure and authentic, non-mixed motive heart that actually gets it when it comes to the things of God. See, for many of us, whether you are just exploring spirituality or you just started a relationship with Jesus, whether you've been growing up in church your whole life like I have, or if the faith thing is still really new to you, we can all buy into the lie that how our behavior externally kind of shows up, the things that we play, the right words to say, or how many religious activities that we can do, that's how we're going to feel close to God. And while all of those things are fine and good and certainly have their place, what Jesus said on the side of that mountain that was so crazy to his original followers and still to this day is so challenging to so many of us is that actually the God that we serve doesn't really care about the external version of us. Because he knows what we started our conversation recognizing is that the external stuff isn't actually the source, it's the byproduct. See, the reality is that the people around you, the people around me, experience what is already true within us. You put it this way, that people around you experience the overflow of you. That people around you experience the overflow of you. And so when Jesus says God blesses those who are pure in heart, what he's saying is that they're not trying to play a part or play a game. They're not trying to, mask or manipulate their appearances like so many of their people in their culture, especially religious culture, were known for doing. And so many of us can fall into the trap of doing ourselves. And so when we're in this moment like we are now, this cultural pandemic, where people all over our country and around the world are doing something that they've never done in their lifetime, staying at home with their family for weeks on end, all of their family, all day long. There are things, I'm sure, in your life, there have certainly been things in our house that have bubbled out of each of us, that have come to the surface, things we've said, things we've done, that we're like, dang, where did that come from? And the reality is, as hard as it is to admit this sometimes, where did it come from? It came from my heart. It was a moment where what was in me came out of me. Most of the time, my low stress or relaxed persona or my care for other people and what they think about me holds my filter pretty tight. But when I'm stressed or I'm tired or I've been doing the same thing over and over and I just miss seeing people or going and grabbing a cup of coffee or going out to eat or doing something by myself outside of my house, whatever it might be, my filter just begins to break down. And things that usually would get caught in the filter begin to make it through, begin to come out. And while in those moments I'm sad about it, I'm frustrated about it because it hurts my wife or my kids or my friends or it makes me look bad, and all of those things can be things I have to apologize for or to own up to. But in reality, in those moments, when those things that are in us actually break through our filter and they come out in real time, that can actually be one of the best invitations to transformation, because now I see what's been in here all along. Now you see what's been in there all along. Or worse, now our roommates or our spouses or our kids see what is in us. And we have to face what is true about who I am, about what I feel, about what's going on in my interior life, my interior world. And for many of us, as much as we can regret those moments or be frustrated that it comes out or just blame it on quarantine, what if God has an invitation for you and for me in this moment when things are coming out of us that we're like, where did that come from? Why is that there? I'm so scared or sad or angry at myself for letting that come out. What if in that moment, actually this beatitude, this crazy thing that Jesus said is actually an invitation for transformation for you and for me? Because the people around us experience the overflow of us. See, we often think that what someone does is actually what defines them as good or evil. And in our moments where something comes out of us and we do something we wish we hadn't, or something that kind of is even below our own standards for ourselves, we often will be quick to compare to someone else's behavior. Well, I'm not as bad as that person, or I'm better than them. And for many of us, when we find ourselves in this trap, we totally miss the point of what Jesus is trying to say. See, Jesus looks to our hearts and says that God actually cares more about what's going on inside of you, inside of me, than what happens on the outside, than the external circumstances or choices. Now, they're very connected, right? Just like a tree and its fruit are connected, what happens inside of us shows up on the outside. But when we try to play this posturing game and pretend that we're a certain way with God that's different from what's actually going on inside, Jesus says you're missing the entire point. You actually won't be able to perceive and know and experience the things of God in your life and in the world if you aren't true to what's happening in your heart. Later, as he finally, at the end of his kind of ministry, right before he would actually be arrested and falsely tried and eventually murdered, he was really sparring with the religious leaders of his day. And people came up to him afterwards and says, Jesus, why are you and the religious leaders always at odds? Like, it feels like you're talking about the same thing. You're teaching us new perspectives on these old religious traditions or this ancient text that they also seem to care about quite a bit, but you always seem to be kind of making them upset. And in Matthew 15:8, he says this scathing critique that I hope we don't just point externally, but we allow it to actually come internal and ask ourselves some good questions so that God might be able to do some transformative work in your life and in mine. Jesus says this, these people, talking about the religious people, the religious leaders of his day, they honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They say the right thing. They know all the right tricks, but what's happening inside is at a distance from the things that I actually care about. And what Jesus was saying to his first followers about the religious system of his day, what he says to me about the religious system of our day that I hope to pass on to people that I engage with. And when I think about the way I used to live, I knew how to play the game and say the right thing and pretend to do the right thing, and my heart never was transformed. And yet when we engage with what is true in our hearts, as ugly as it might feel, we actually invite God to do some incredible transformative work in our life. So here's what I want to leave you with. This challenging thought and idea that I hope is an invitation for you to experience transformation even in the midst of quarantine. I know it has been for me as I've been studying and writing this. The truth is that God cares about what's happening in your heart, so that's where your focus should start. That God cares about what's happening in your heart, and so that's where your focus should start. Oftentimes when we come to church or our approach to spirituality, we try to get better in our life. We are quick to approach our external circumstances or even our behavior. And while behavior modification and finding new habits and all that can be good and helpful, the truest thing about God, what's unique about Jesus, is that he says, actually, God cares about what's happening in your heart. And so that's where you and I should focus the most. That if we take care of what's going on inside, eventually what's happening in our outside world, our actions, our words, our perspectives on things, those will eventually become, formed and shaped by the truth of God that's going on and the transformation that's happening inside our hearts. So God cares about what's happening in your heart. So that's where your focus should start. So a couple of application questions, right? That's some good theological work, but I want this to be practical for you and for me in your life this week. Here's the couple questions to ask. What was the last time that as you kind of wrapped up your day, that rather than just checking in with what happened, externally in your calendar, with your finances, or with other people, when was the last time that you checked in with your heart? That you ask yourself, what's going on in my heart today? Is there someone that I may have hurt that I need to ask for forgiveness from? Is there something that came out of me that rather than downplay it or dismiss it or excuse it or find some reason why I'm a victim to my circumstances, I can take radical responsibility to go, hey, that came out of me, which means that was in me. I need to air that or clean that up or even just sit with that for a while. Maybe another question to ask is, what's the dominant emotion that you've felt over the last 24 hours? Maybe the last 48 hours. To do some heart check-in for yourself, to ask the question, what have I felt? Have I just been too crazy with the kids and Zoom meetings and work and cleaning the house and the dog or whatever that I haven't been able to really pause and reflect and ask myself, am I happy? Am I sad? Am I angry? Am I scared? Am I just tender after all that's going on around me or in the world or within me? Is there something I should pay attention to? What's the dominant emotion that you've felt the most over the last 24 hours? To check in with yourself. And then when it comes to our relationship with God, here's the real kicker, is to ask the question, can I bring the raw state of my heart to God without religious additives? Can I bring the raw state that we just checked in with our heart? We just, asked the question, what emotions am I feeling, right? Can I bring that as it is to God without religious additives? To not have to explain it away to myself or to God or not try to justify it, but to simply go, God, I blew it today. God, I'm angry that we're still in quarantine. God, thank you for my kids, but wow, they're driving me nuts. Or God, I'm stressed, I'm scared. My job might be on the line. Finances were already tough. Where are you? Can you bring the raw and real state, the pure, the integrity-oriented space of your heart, the truth of your heart to God without religious additives, without fluff, without feeling like you have to say the right things? I think for so many of us, this is actually what keeps us from a real relationship with God, is because we feel like we have to say the right words or do the right things or play the right part. And Jesus is inviting you and inviting me every time. When we follow Jesus, he says God is the kind of God that says, just bring it. Whatever it is. Even if you don't like it, I love it because I love you. And I want the real you. And so can we bring the raw state of our heart to God without religious additives, without buffering it or changing it or explaining it away? Because when we do that, the promise Jesus makes in this beatitude actually comes true. You will see God. You will perceive the work of God in your life, in your family, in your workplace, in our city, out in the world. When we bring our truth to God, we will see his activity in the world. What an incredibly profound promise that Jesus makes. So that's my hope for you, to ask those questions this week. What are the things that I've felt in the last 24 hours? Have I checked in with my heart today before my head hits the pillow? Have I checked in with my internal world, knowing that affects and overflows into the lives of people around me? And can I bring the reality of that to God without religious additives, without adding to it, without adjusting it or changing it or putting religious wrapping paper on maybe a hard situation? Because when you do, you will perceive how God is at work in the world. I long that our community becomes a place where we don't hide behind the religious right words to say or the right things to do, but that we actually allow, even when it's not pretty, the truth of our life, the truth of our hearts to come out in the open in our own conversations with God or even in community with others, so that we can actually be transformed by the work of God and not just hide behind religious behavior modification. And so this beatitude, this specific teaching, is so profound to who we want to be as Restoration Church. That we would bring ourselves to God and say, would you restore me? This thing that's clearly in me, would you heal it? Would you adjust it in your time and your way? Would you give me new perspective? And when we do that, this crazy thing that Jesus says actually becomes so transformative in our lives, even here and now, thousands of years later and thousands of miles away. So I want to pray for you, and I'm just going to warn you ahead of time. I'm going to give you a little bit of space to actually do a heart check-in right now. I hope this isn't the only time that you do it today, but I at least want to give you a chance to practice, and then we're going to approach God in prayer together and bring our raw state of our heart without religious additives to God together as a community right now. So take a moment, if you can kind of slow things down, even just, take a deep breath. What's going on in your heart? What's your week been like? Even this morning, has it been crazy to try to tune in to church? Has this message challenged you, offended you, pushed you? Is there a moment this past week where what was in you came out and you were embarrassed or frustrated or ashamed? Is there something that you've been carrying in your heart that's weighty, that's heavy? Something with your job, with your finances, or a loved one, or with just the state of our culture? Is there something that you've been carrying and you thought you had to carry it alone? So you kept it from God, maybe not even on purpose. Can you bring it to Him? Can you bring it to Him as it is, not when it's bowed up later, not when it's all perfect and put together? Can you bring it to Him right now, as you are? Let's actually come to God together right now, as we are. He receives us. He receives you. Let's pray. God, our hands are open because we know that it's only because of your goodness that we can approach you. Because if we're honest, it's way easier to hide. It's way easier to edit, to filter or adjust. And yet, Jesus, we want to love and follow you, the one who says, bring your truth, bring your distilled, your non-mixed, bring your pure heart to God so that you can see how He's at work in you. We want to follow you, not follow religion that says, be sure to add all these extra things and be sure to shroud the bad parts of yourself that you don't even like. Because if you don't like Him, surely God doesn't. God, would we abandon that life and step forward in freedom and empowerment and grace to follow you, Jesus, who says, God blesses those who have a pure heart. Because when we bring our hearts to you in their pure form, God, we can actually see you growing us. Because we didn't hide parts of ourselves from you. We didn't hide our anger or our grief or our fear. We didn't hold back on our celebration and excitement, and we definitely didn't withdraw from you or protect you from the things that we don't like about ourselves. And so when we bring it to you, we can see how you are at work, growing us, transforming us, changing us. We can see it in ourselves, in our families, in our kids, and in our culture. And so God, I pray that we would not miss out on perceiving your activity, your transformational work in our life and in our world because we withheld our hearts from you. I pray that this week we would be able to check in with what we're feeling, with what we're carrying, and bring our hearts, give us courage to bring our hearts in their real and raw form to you, trusting that you already know and that you want to meet us in that place with your love and your grace. So Jesus, it's because of you that we pray all these things. Thank you for teaching us through this very simple phrase. What a life-transforming principle. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. Amen. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and walking with us on this journey through this series. We have one more week. We can't wait to wrap it up next Sunday. We hope you'll join us. But our gathering isn't over. We're going to continue to worship, to sing, and to give to God. And for those of you that call this church home and giving is the way that you worship, I just want to say thank you. That this is actually a way that our external actually demonstrates what's true inside of us. That's why Jesus said that actually God loves a cheerful giver. Right? We don't want giving to be one of those religious additives that we do it because we feel like we should, that we want it to boil over out of a heart of gratitude and generosity, thankful for all that God has done and given to us. We all have things that we wish were different, right? None of us have everything that we want. But if we're honest, even in tough, challenging times, we all have more than we need. And so we want to be the kind of church that lives into our value of radical generosity, saying that we give more than is required. And we know that in this challenging time, there are so many in our culture and even many in our church that are in greater need of financial assistance. And so if that's you, please don't feel any obligation to give. If you're viewing for the first time and you're just checking us out, we're so glad you're here. Please don't feel any obligation to give. But for those of you that this is your home, I want to present you with an opportunity that you, through your giving, can demonstrate what God is doing in your heart, how He's transforming your life, and meet incredibly important and tangible needs in our church and around our city in this important time. That as the world is afraid, as the world is unsure of the future, we can step out in faith and trust, not in ourselves and certainly not in our resources, but in the God who richly provides and meets and provides for all of our needs. And so for you might be in a spot where you can actually give more than you have before, and now is a great time to do that. You can give right here. If you're at restorationchurchsd.com/live, you can scroll down and click to give. If you're watching on any of our other platforms, Facebook or YouTube, or later in the week, you can go to restorationchurchsd.com/give, or you can grab your cell phone right now and text any amount to 84321 and set up one-time or reoccurring giving by following the prompts. Just select Restoration Church as your giving destination. We're so grateful for those of you that give. Thank you again for being a part of our mission of empowering all people to love and follow Jesus through your generosity. I would encourage you to worship with us as we close out our worship gathering this morning with this song.